Hello, everyone, and welcome to All of Us. My name is Rachel Wade. I'm the Chief Encourager and founder here at All of Us, and I am so excited to welcome Tasha June, episode 41. Is it 41? Yes, it is. The Sacred Work of Belonging. Now, before I introduce her, we are taping in the month of May, and this episode that you're hearing will air on June 1st. But I have to say, because I have my sister here with me, happy AAPI month. This is a month that we celebrate the beauty and the belovedness of our Asian American and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters all over the world. And so we just want to give voice to that. We want to say, we have so many AAPI women in the All of Us community. And we just want you to keep showing up exactly as you are in this world. I'm so grateful that you are a part of this community at All of Us. And you matter, and we love you. And so we want to honor this month, even though you will hear this next month. We want to honor you all the time, but we have to give voice to this month and what it is. So Tasha, welcome to All of Us. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Yep, celebrating with you every month.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Tasha, can you let everybody know who you are, where you're from, kind of give them the baseball card stats on who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Tasha June. I am a wife. I've got 3 kids, ages 14, 11, and 8. And I live in the greater Indianapolis area. Grew up kind of all over the world, but this is home now. So yeah.
Love it. Well, so love having you here. We have a lot of mutual friends, and we were just talking about how we feel like we've already, been in person before. God willing, that will happen soon, hopefully. But yeah, it's just so nice to be with another kindred heart. I have to say, before we really get into the meat of the interview, that Tasha is a beautiful writer, and she is a writer that, for me, when I read her writing, whether it's on Instagram or whether it's in a book, and we'll get to her book very soon, I feel so covered and protected and loved. And I think of the scriptures, one of my favorites, about how God covers us in the shadow of his wing. And I just feel so close to Tasha when she writes. And so I would love for you, if you're not familiar with Tasha's writing, to find her writing, because I think that you'll feel the very same way. Her writing is spectacular. So thank you, Tasha, for your offerings that you share with the world in all the ways that you do.
Yeah, that's so kind. I don't think anyone's ever said that before. So I'm like, oh, that's a little teary for me. Thank you for that. Yeah.
You're welcome. Well, it's true. It's true. So I've titled this episode, like I said, The Sacred Work of Belonging. And so we're going to do just that. We're going to talk about belonging. But first, I want to talk about your Jesus journey, Tasha. How did you come to know Jesus?
Yeah. I like to describe it as a lot of puzzle pieces. I had a lot of puzzle pieces growing up. My grandparents on my dad's side were very strong believers, talked about Jesus all the time, but I didn't see them that often. So when I did, they would ask me questions, and I always was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they would tell me stories. And then my mom, she grew up in Korea and had some extended family that was Catholic, but outside of that did not grow up with much of a faith background. And she started to learn about Jesus from like movies, like the 10 Commandments. I talk about this in my book, Better, which of course is not, it's fiction, right? But she had a really unique relationship with Jesus. And as a child, I watched her kind of dependence on Jesus without much of a faith background. And that really impacted me. And so I had all these bits and pieces, but really was uncomfortable with church. So it wasn't until later that I started to go to youth group with a friend, and all the pieces started to come together. And so that's when the Bible kind of became real to me, and Jesus became a real intimate person in my life.
I always love to ask this question because, we all come from different places. Some of us grew up in the church, some of us did not. A lot of people's story is that they were introduced to the Lord in some way, shape, or form, but they really didn't have a real relationship till like their 20s. I mean, everyone just has these different stories, and it's fun to see where we have been, where we met Jesus, kind of as a marker in our lives, and then share where we are now. So it's just always so fun to ask that question. Well, Tasha, let's get into our episode. So, many of us know, we've talked a lot about this. You see this a lot on Instagram and just other places, but this idea of belonging. Science tells us, and when I had littles, my daughter is almost 9 and I have a son that's almost 6. And when they were little babies, there was almost this pressure around like, well, make sure that it's like this secure attachment, like this term that I had never been introduced to. And science kind of came out through all of my childhood education of how to be a parent, 101 books that tell you something, don't tell you anything at all at the same time. But anyhow, science would tell us that, babies that don't have that secure attachment in those early months, those early years, there's a deficiency there. I mean, there is a need for us. We were created for community and to have that belonging in those beginning years and to build on that. And so with that being said, and putting science kind of aside for a second, can you talk to us about what is your definition of belonging, and then why is it sacred work? And we'll get into why we're going to ask you these questions in just a second.
Yeah. So my definition, and I don't have a straight one, but my definition is it all surrounds our belovedness. And so I think belonging is feeling and knowing and experiencing that belovedness of God in all of our being, in every part. And I think it's sacred work because I think, we were just talking about our Jesus stories, or I was sharing a little bit of mine. And I think a lot of times we get away from, we either don't know, or we get away from that belief, believing that we are beloved and that we actually, we're born with belonging and carry it in our bodies. And so I think going back to that, and all of it, for all of us, I think it's going to be different, is work. Not work that we have to do to prove it, but work to embrace that. So.
Yeah, I love that. And, and I think depending on how we were raised and in our context and just where we're at in life, like belonging, or the sense and feeling of belonging, is different from person to person and woman to woman. And, as a mixed race woman, and you as well, that belonging, I think, can be complicated and complex depending on where we were raised and what it looked like. I said this on the blog, and I'll say this here on this recording too, but it has been a mixed bag for me personally, unpacking my mixed race and being raised in the South and not feeling like I belonged in one space or the other. So I'm a quarter Japanese. My mother is half Black, half Japanese, and my grandmother, who's still alive and 95, lives in Fort Worth, Texas, not too far from where I grew up. And growing up, I never was Asian enough. I didn't look Asian, to all of and there wasn't a ton of Asian people in my school anyway. It was predominantly white and Hispanic. But not being Asian enough there, and then also not being Black enough. I mean, my hair texture is different. My features are different and more Asian than, Black people. And so I just even the way that I look, it never allowed me to feel as if I belonged, and then people treated me as such in the South. And so that not knowing where to fit in, but then also wanting to fit into the dominant culture, because that was what was beautiful, that's what was accepted, was my struggle. And so, Tasha, I don't know if there's similar, do you have similar sentiments in your story? I'd love to hear that. And then what happens when we don't, when belonging looks one way, rather than, welcoming in everyone and saying, let's belong, and it might look a little bit different.
Yeah. And in very similar ways, but obviously different as well. Our stories are different, but also in similar ways. I think, when I was really little, all I knew was that our house had two cultures. Our house had, two different races, without the language even to use, right? That the world eventually gave me. I was very aware of the fact that there were two things always going on. On our table, we had a mix of foods. And there was always this like combination of things. Like my dad would bring in some other dip that, wasn't Korean for our dumplings. But we had everything, and we talked about it, and it felt very much like, well, this is us and this is me. But then going out
Mm,
into the world, kind of like you brought up, it was like a one rude awakening after another, where I thought I'm Korean, I'm also white, I'm both, I'm all these things, and I was sure of that, and then moved out into the world. The first time we went to Korea, I was so sure that it would feel like amazing, like
mm,
home. And in some ways it did. There were pockets of that throughout. And it was wonderful, like to see more of my mom's, her, all of
sure.
her there, like everywhere we went. But then I had these just, and I wrote about them in the book, just really rude awakenings where it was like, oh, I no one sees me as Korean. Like they don't think I'm Korean. And even if I say I'm Korean, it's like oh, sure, or like very rudely, disagreed
Yeah.
with the fact that I
Mm,
could, you know, bear any Koreanness. And so that was really hard to kind of grapple with. And I think for a while I felt very sure to explain my Koreanness. I'm only this much Korean.
yes.
Oh, I only,
Right.
all these, if I said anything
Yeah.
about being Korean, it was like I have to explain it, prove it, or give all these like explanations for why I would ever say
Yeah.
anything like that. Like it was so audacious. So, and then I think too, on the flip side, even though my dad is white and I bear that as well, I have never been like kind of accepted as white, and I've never felt
Yeah.
like I don't know. I mean, I think just just our appearance, just the way we do things, the way that I was fed and nurtured in my home, especially by my mom, just made me feel very much not a part of that. Like it felt very uncomfortable
Mhm.
and foreign. So all that to say, I think it very much the message is all along the way is that we don't belong here. We don't
Yeah.
belong
Right.
here. And so your option is either to fix it, try to fix it and like shove yourself into one of the spaces or resist
Mhm.
everything. I don't know. And I don't know where that leads you. So,
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
Nowhere good and healthy, I think. I
Yeah,
mean, I feel, I don't know about you, but
exactly.
I feel like I have and continuing to pull back these layers of who God made me to be, and my belovedness, of what that looks like, embracing the Japanese side of me,
Yeah.
or the part of me, and also the Black part of me. And I am seeing as older as I get, the more work that I do, the more I begin to love myself and love who God made me to be. It's almost pretty jaw dropping how much I tried to assimilate
Yeah.
into the dominant culture.
Yeah.
And I hear you. I mean, that's why our stories are very different, but same in many veins. And just Christmas was chitlins and sushi for me. I mean, chitlins is a
Yes.
very Southern Black. This is
Yeah.
what we do. And having sushi at the same meal. I mean, this was my story. My Japanese grandmother had to learn how to clean chitlins, because they had a
Yeah.
black husband, and so having those merging, just that, and almost feeling like I felt like I had to hide
Mhm.
that was not okay. But then there's times where I'm like, oh no, I'm not all the way Black. Wait,
Yeah,
let me
yeah,
prove
yeah.
to you that I'm not all the
Yes.
way Black.
Yes.
And not saying that with my voice, but saying it with how I showed up and what I
Mhm.
chose for my world to see and not see. And what that does is, man, it doesn't allow us to show up,
Right.
and it kind of goes on with the dominant culture. And we did the best that we did, and there's been so much grace and work for
Yeah.
myself. I don't know about you, to say, I wish I would have had that language, or I
Yeah.
wish I would have said this in that scenario. But we did the best that we could,
Yeah.
especially as young people.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
mm,
And I mean, I think too, with, the kind of messages that we were given, my mom never taught me to be ashamed of being Korean. And
right.
yet there was so much pain in her story and so much survival. just trying
Yeah,
to
so
survive, that there was
much.
no room for her to thrive or even think about like, am I assimilating? No, I'm just trying to live here,
No, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's
No.
survival. It's like, yeah, we're
Yes.
not going to speak Japanese because we need to learn how to speak English. Like that was a part of my grandmother's story. So it was like, no, I'm not going to teach you all Japanese. You need to learn, you need to be speaking English,
Yeah.
and that was a survival.
Right. We gotta eat.
So
We gotta get
so much.
groceries. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to find work, like she had
Yes.
to find work.
Yes. Oh my
So all
gosh.
of the things, I know we could go on and on and
I know.
on.
I have so
And
many questions now.
exactly. But and we will, for those of you
Yeah.
listening, I always do an Instagram live, and that's, we can dig more into that. We're going to invite a special guest friend along with us to the Instagram live, and we'll go deeper into our stories. But as we talk about belonging, we kind of mixed in like cultural, like assimilation and the church, like for the church, because we are believers and this community is a body of believers. Tasha, what do we miss out on when the Big C Church, what do we have at stake? What's at stake when we kind of had this colorblind theology? When we do church, when we worship Jesus, when it all looks one way rather than
Yeah.
welcoming the entire Imago Dei.
Yeah. I mean, I think really we are just limiting our intimacy with the Lord. We're limiting our ability to see more and more of who God is and how God wants to show up, how God wants to express um, his reflection. And so we're missing out on that. We're missing out on receiving love, from people who are different from us, and in ways that I think we actually probably really need, but don't know that we need it. So much of life is that way. But I think that we were made to give and to receive love from a beautiful array of people and colors and ways. It's just such a limited way of being. And I really think that it gives a limited view of Jesus and a limited view of love. So I think,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
often sometimes I get frustrated sometimes because I'm like, I mean, if we're believers, I'm like, why would we think that God would create us differently and
I,
not want for him to see us, and that there would be many expressions of,
yeah,
you know, who he is and the beauty of us coming together and even the different gifts that he's put into us and how we're
yeah,
we're different in every way, but the beautiful mosaic that we make
yeah,
up when we come together. I mean, there's nothing like it. I want to tell a quick story just because she's one of
yeah,
your dear friends and is now becoming a close friend of mine, Dorina. She is, also an All of Us sister. She's episode 39, and we've got a chance to co-labor alongside one another in some different spaces. And she got the chance to come to San Francisco, and she stayed after a conference that we did together at my church, Epic Church in San Francisco. And I bring this story up to say that we have about 60 different nations in our church and multi-ethnic. And one of the things that Dorina said to me afterwards was she's like, there is just such a difference in the atmosphere when you have a different body of believers with different expressions
yeah,
of worshiping the Lord and seeing those giftings and actually lived out, but together. She's
yeah,
like, this feeling, like this is the way it's supposed to be. And there is something different if you are in spaces that look different and everyone is really seen and there's a real sense of belonging, not just like a diversity, like, oh, look at us, we have like different,
yeah,
a true sense of belonging. There
mm,
is something that the Lord does when we are together like
yeah,
that we're missing out on when
yes,
don't
yes,
have spaces that look like that. We're just missing out.
oh
And I
yeah,
want to say that with honesty and boldness, because I know a lot of All of Us sisters are in spaces that look one way. However,
yeah,
that is, it looks one way. And I don't know, I know people live in different parts of the country. I know there's so many, differences there,
yeah,
but as best as you can, wherever God has assigned you, if you can try to make that look and feel and have people belong, that it has the entire Imago Day around the table.
yeah,
I'm going to encourage you to do that. I'm going to encourage you to do
yes,
that.
yes, yes, yes,
Have you sensed that difference? Have you sensed that real, like, uh, body of believers
Yeah.
belonging, Tasha, in some of your spaces when it looks different.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I have not been in a worship, like a faith community, locally that looks like that. I
Mhm.
do feel like there is desire for that. But I feel like a lot of my own sacred work of belonging in this in a communal way has been to push for that, create it, bring things together, um,
Mhm.
initiate that as much as I possibly can while being realistic about where I am,
Yes.
but initiating that as much
Yes.
as I can because it is holy work. It is a better taste of God. And so I want that for everyone, not just me, not just because I like it and I know, yeah. But then
Yes.
outside of like locally, I do feel like I've experienced that in some places when we gather together or in online spaces. And, it's not quite
Yeah.
the same, but it matters. And I feel like it pushes me forward. Like this is possible. This is good. And
Mhm.
this is something that to keep moving towards. So
Yes, and that's a great segue because you wrote this book, Tell
yeah,
Me the Dream Again. And let's see, so this comes out, what's the date that this comes out, Tasha?
it comes out May 9th. So 1 week from today,
May 9th.
actually. Yeah.
So when this when this episode airs, this book is out. And I'm just gonna
Yay.
prophecy that this is doing well in the world and people are growing and God is, doing what he only does through a book or speaking into the future. But this book, and as we talk about belonging and we talk about what it looks like to see people. I think, you talked about this in your book, Tasha, that it starts right here too. It starts in
Yes.
your heart. If you're not watching
Yes.
Emily, you're like, starts where, Rachel? Starts in your heart. And it starts with the work, the beautiful sacred work of you belonging and arriving and actually identifying with who God made you to be. And I love that you talk about the work, the beautiful sacred work of belonging in your book through your story.
Yeah.
And so tell us about, why the title, Tell Me the Dream Again, and why was it time to take the things that God has been working on in your heart and put it on paper?
Yeah.
Why now?
Yeah. Some of that's still a mystery to me, but the title, the title actually comes from one of the early chapters. It's based on a conversation I really had with my mom, and multiple times. She had this recurring dream about a tiger and you have to read it to get the full effect, but this tiger
Yes,
is up in the
yes.
night sky that appears roaring and it turns into me. And so I was very taken aback by that as a child, enamored with it, and also very much felt like that's not me. But in the dialogue, I'm like, tell me the dream again, mom, because I wanted to hear it again and again. So that's where the title came from, and it was actually we had a different working title for a long time, and it was actually in text messages back and forth with my editor, Jillian. We had things going back and forth and nothing felt right. And she finally texted that, what about this? And it was beautiful. It was perfect. And it's kind of a testament to the fact that, in a lot of ways, publishing a book can be very much, it's a communal thing. And so she pulled
Yes.
that out and I was like, that's the title. That's the one that we've been waiting for. This book, it's made for. So anyway, so that's how that came to be. And this book I actually started writing over 20 years ago in college. I'm very old. But it was in memoir, it was in a memoir class. The first time I had ever read memoirs. And so it was this tiny class and we read a bunch of memoirs, really, really just heart-wrenching memoirs. And the whole experience was transformative. I have a whole talk that I give on it because it was so transformative for me. But the end of the class, we were supposed to write our own. And so all that would come out were these stories about my mom that I'd grown up hearing in tandem with some
Mm,
of my own. But at
yeah.
that time, my own were kind of lacking because I was still learning to be honest with myself and honest, especially with others about who I was. And so I
Mhm.
couldn't finish it. I mean, I finished it for the grade, like as much as I could, but it just kind of
Yeah.
sat, yeah, in a box forever. And then they just
Wow.
started, all the stories kept coming up again. And I would write articles, for online things, and like tidbits of those stories would keep coming up. And it was like just this burning thing inside that was like, it's ready, it wants to come out. So, um,
I
just
love that.
these untold stories that were like, it's time. So, yeah, so
Yeah.
it's kind of,
That's the story of that.
yeah,
And it's so is a memoir. You have reflections on family, ethnicity, and the sacred work of belonging, and you bring us along in the journey. And again, reading the dream that just the beautiful connection with your mother, I think too, in your relationship. And thank you for letting us into your story. I mean, this is deeply personal, and I imagine it was probably cathartic, but also like hard, but joyous. I mean, there's probably a range of emotions, if I had to guess, of actually writing and finishing and editing and all the things that come with that come
yeah,
with a book. But I love some of your favorite work that I love to read about from you is on shalom, the idea of shalom. And 𝗫𝗎𝗄𝐿. And so, because you have a whole chapter, I believe, on that in your book.
yeah,
And so,
yeah.
can you tell people what is shalom? Define that for us if people don't know. And then what is 𝗫𝗎𝗄𝐿 and why even give a chapter to this in your
Yeah.
book?
Yeah. So shalom is a Hebrew word, and I think it was often used as a greeting, like shalom, like peace be with you. It means peace, but it's deeper than just the simple, lack of conflict or chaos in the moment. It's like a deep wholeness, and wishing that for one another.
Mm.
I ended up putting that together because I think my whole life I felt homesick. And when I was younger, I thought something was wrong with me because I mean, I could never define when someone said, "Where's home for you?" I had no idea. Just it felt like a really hard thing to answer, or I would just give an answer, but always had this ache. It kind of goes with
Mm.
just kind of my melancholy leanings. And then I think as I got older and I grew in my faith, I think I realized it's not just, and of course, as I've like traveled all over and tried to find what's home, like so just searching, trying to find home in other people and places, and it always coming up short. Um,
Mm.
and so I think that just helped me to realize that this is a deeper ache. I'm
Yeah.
aching for wholeness, for me, and not just for me, like wholeness for me, but wholeness for the community that I'm surrounded by, for the world. I mean, that it's all connected. And the ache runs so deep, and it's only something that God can answer. That God can, I mean, He uses us, but I think that it's something in motion too. And so,
Yeah.
um, I felt like I really wanted to stay with that ache and also
Yeah.
believe, that there is shalom in the end, there is shalom now,
Mm.
there are glimpses of it now. It's something in motion for all of us.
Mm. Yeah. This is, and I'm holding back tears right now because I'm just thinking about shalom and being shalom sick. I've never been to Japan, and we lost contact with all my family there. My grandmother had to make a decision after she married my grandfather to come to America. They're like, well, we're done with you here. So
Oh,
we don't have any contact with our family
yeah.
in Japan. No one, my grandmother won't go back to Japan. My family has not been. Like, it's just she is hurt. She's still hurting. And so my husband actually is the first one. I mean, and obviously, he married me, so he's the first one in my family that has gone, to Japan. I mean, my uncles were born there and lived there, but my mother did not. And when he went for work this past fall, Tasha, I wasn't prepared for how there that 𝗫𝗎𝗄𝐿 kind of like when he came back and he said to me, "You are there, Rachel. Like
Oh,
I am." Like he's like, "You are there. Like those are your people. Like this is I see so much of you in the Japanese culture." And I think that like when you mentioned shalom, like as I continue to, pray like God, I don't have to physically be in a place or
yeah,
be with, to feel shalom. And
yeah,
and I believe that God can meet us and we can feel, that shalom
yeah,
and experience that in different ways through food, which I love when you talk about that in your book. And but even there's just supernatural things.
Yeah.
Like I just went to an Asian art museum in Seattle, and like I went into a room of ceramic plates and I was able to find the Japanese plates without like, and it's because
Ew.
they've been in my life. Yeah, they've been in my life. You know, I've seen
Yeah.
them at my grandmother, you know, like just points in my life where I've seen them. But in a room full of plates, thousands of plates of different cultures, like my
Yeah.
eye can go right to them, or I can hear my people and not speak the language, but know,
Right.
you know, in a
Yeah.
city
Oh,
where I
yeah.
live in, the Asian, I
Right.
know
Yeah.
I can pick out, you know, like Japanese writing over, but I don't know the language, Tasha.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, but those are the times that I feel shalom and I feel that God supernaturally is like, this is you, like you innately, like this is you, Rachel, like
Yeah.
this is in you. And you
Yeah.
don't have to have gone to Japan or you don't have to speak the language,
Right.
but this
Right.
is so finding shalom and
Mm,
saying, like, I just asked God, like, God, I want to know all of me. And so if I supernaturally have to
yeah.
know who I am because I can't physically be in a place or I don't speak a language, like, would
Yeah.
you make that? Would you make that a part
Yeah.
of my in-person story?
Right.
And so yeah, I just wanted to bring that up, like your chapter reminded me that I can have shalom and the shalom sickness that I've desired for, I can have it in different ways. Now it
Yeah.
just might look different. It just might
Right.
look different. So thank
Right.
you. Thank you for
Oh,
all
that's
your writing on
beautiful.
shalom.
And you, I mean, you carry that with you, and God, I mean, God being Emmanuel with us, if that is all from him, those cultural things are all from, God. And so it's with us, it's in you, it's, you can't be taken, right? It can't be erased,
Yeah, that's
even
right.
with all the attempts
Yeah,
to erase, it can't be. Yeah. Thank you for
exactly.
sharing
It's
that.
so
Oh my
true.
gosh.
Oh, thanks for allowing me the space to be able to share because of
Yeah.
your writing on shalom and shalom sickness.
Mm,
I resonate deeply. So thank you there. So Tasha, for the people that pick this up, I mean, no matter who they are, where they come from, whether they're mixed race, whether they can resonate or not. I hope everyone picks up this book. What is your hope and prayer for the reader, the person that opens this up and reads your words?
yeah. I hope that it will give just a little bit of a bigger picture of who God is and how much God loves whoever is reading it. And I also hope it'll give a bigger picture of just the beauty of the church, how different it can be, the Big C church. And also, and the last thing, I guess, three things. I hope that it will point toward, even though it's really specific stuff from my life, my hope is not that it will just make you think about my life, but that it will point towards the specifics in your life, and especially the things that maybe you've been embarrassed or ashamed of, or that you've hidden, or things that you didn't even know, that you'd rejected or hidden, and bring you a little closer to a place of embrace.
I love that. And for the All of Us sister that is multi-ethnic, that lives in America and is struggling to belong, whether that's in her church or in certain spaces, talk to her right now. Encourage her. What would you say on the idea of embracing her belovedness and
Mhm.
belonging?
Yeah. Well, first, that you don't have to prove that you belong. You carry belonging in you. And
Mhm.
also that, God is always doing something new. And I think through
Yes.
your multi-ethnic or biracial, whatever mix that you are, he is not erasing anything or lessening, he is making something new. And so you can step into that and occupy any space that you're in as a whole person, without disclaimers or explanations, with compassion, but as a new thing. Yeah.
Yes, yes, amen. And for the All of Us sister that finds herself in spaces and wants to be a better listener, maybe they're not
Mm,
multi-ethnic, but they're in spaces that have one preferred way, one it just in one way, in thought and how it looks. What would
yeah.
the encouragement you would give this sister on steps forward on how they can be a part of embodying the entire Imago Dei?
Yeah. I would say ask what's missing. Like
Mm,
a
yes.
lot, like just let that be a question. That's something that I carry around. What's
Yeah.
missing? And
Yeah.
how can I move towards that missing piece, whatever God brings up? Because I really believe that when we ask that honestly, that God will answer and there will be something, and it doesn't have to be huge. We're not like trying to solve everything ourselves, right? But there's probably one way, one person, one thing that you can move towards. Um, and try to make a connection with, bring more belonging to your space. So I would say that, and then just to stay curious. Yeah,
Yeah.
simple, but I think it's really important.
Yeah, so important, so important. And I think one thing that I'll wrap up and say is that seeing the entire Imago Dei, the belonging, this unfolding, we're all in process. There's
Yes.
much grace, but then there are also steps of obedience and boldness. If we are the city on the hill, if we are, who God has called to carry out, his love and his mercy and all the things to make disciples, then this has to be a collective
Yes. Yeah.
thing. It
Yes.
has to be all of us have to do this work, and we have to stay curious, and we
Yeah.
have to yeah, and understand it starts right here. Like we said, it starts in your heart, and it starts with you knowing who are you. Do you believe that you are a beloved daughter of the Most High King, and unfolding those layers of you and understanding where you come from.
Mhm.
Get curious about yourself too, and where you come from. And then I think that just natural progression is to get curious about others in your space. And
Yeah.
like you said, what is missing? Lord, what is missing in this space? What can I bring to this space? How can you use me and what you're trying to do here in my city, in my church, in this small group, at my kids' school, wherever God, takes you? Asking that question is a good one. So thank you,
Mm.
Tasha.
Thank
Well, thank
you.
you for your time with us today. We're going to end with our rapid fire questions. Are you ready, Tasha?
Yes.
All right. Here we go. God is,
Love.
belonging is sacred work because,
Because it brings us into our belovedness.
love that. Accepting who we are and where we come from is,
Sacred work.
amen. And all of us are better
When we do this together.
together. Amen. Well, Tasha, thank you for being on All of Us. You are a beautiful daughter of the Most High King. I'm excited about this book coming out. It's out now. And if people want to reach out to you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to read your writing, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so my website usually I think has links to everything. It's TashaJune.com, pretty easy. Instagram, that's the one place I like to be most of the time. And then my handle is TashaJuneB. So yeah.
Beautiful. And we'll put all this in the show notes so you don't have to capture this as you're listening right now. But Tasha, thank you so much. And All of Us family, we will see you soon. Join us on Instagram Live with Tasha very soon. We will dive deeper into this episode. And like I said, we'll have a special guest with us to talk about just belonging and what it looks like in our different contexts and places and spaces. So for now, we'll say goodbye. See you, All of Us.
Bye.